was in Idaho in the October of 23, a year ago, and elk hunting. And I was playing a cat and mouse with a lion up there. Those tags, if you get an elk tag, you can use it for a bear, a cat, a wolf, a deer. And so I was just playing this cat and mouse game. I was on some elk trail one day. I found a whitetail that was scratched up a little bit, and so I pulled it kind of across the hill a little bit, and I came back the next morning and it was tucked under a fallen tree, covered up with leaves, chewed on. Did the same thing. I pulled it out and I just kind of hung out in that area all day. Didn't see anything. I did that for the next 3 days, and every day I came back, and I would pull the deer out, and every day I would come back, the deer would be eating a little bit more on and stuffed under this tree, and it was just really cool, man. It was kind of nerve wracking though, going in before sunrise and going out after dark. Like I kept my pistol like on me, not in my backpack, but like actually in my hand. Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Fair Chase podcast. Excited to come back to you again with a repeat guest. And so, I don't know, Father Stephen Gadberry, thanks for joining us. It's been a little while.
Yeah, buddy, thanks. It's always good to chat with you and, keep up with you and everyone else in the community.
Yeah, it's cool. I love watching the things you do because, like, you'll be doing, your priestly duties. You'll be making knives or working out or hunting, and it's like you lead an interesting life. You got a lot going on.
Yeah, I think in today's world, like we're so connected, and I think people have a tendency to want to present only a small fraction of who they are as a person, like the little thing that they're best at, or their little baby, or whatever it may be. But for me, I'm just all about the whole person. If I'm with someone in real life, I want to be with them. Like I want to know the whole person, not just a fragmented part of them. And so I just try to share that in social media, all that I can. Yeah.
Well, and the joy you've got, people talk about, the joy that comes with, being a believer in Jesus Christ and the joy de vivre that you get from that. And it definitely shows through in the things you're doing. It's fun. It's just a fun thing.
Well, cool, man. Thanks.
So you're a priest and you live in Arkansas. People, if they've listened to our show, they can go back and hear who you are and everything. But for people who haven't listened to the episode, maybe just a general overview of who you are. What do you do?
Stephen Gadberry. I'm born and raised in Arkansas. I'm full time in ministry. I'm a Catholic priest. Christian. So that's grew up on a farm, military vet, did, seminary. That was 8 years of school in Louisiana, and then also in Rome, Italy, at the Vatican. That was pretty cool. Been back here in Arkansas for going on 10 years now. And currently I'm pastor at St. Teresa Catholic Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. It's the capital, dead center of the state. A little over 10,000 members, and a school, preschool through 8th grade. So that's just kind of my life in my free time, which isn't much. So I try to make free time, so I just stay up stupidly late and don't sleep well, and don't take care of myself. But I love to exercise, love to make knives, love to hunt, and that's kind of my free time, what I do.
Yeah, and so you said you studied in Louisiana and Rome, which, I mean, as everybody that's listening to the podcast knows, Louisiana is the Rome of the United States. So, I mean, it seems like that was probably a pretty smooth transition.
Yeah, Louisiana's a pretty cool place, man.
I'm excited, actually. So I've got a wife and a daughter, and we do a ton of camping summer and stuff. And so my daughter's got this big map that you scratch off states with a penny as you visited them. And so we all talk about, it's a big thing that we talk about. What states have we hit yet? And, where are we going? We've hit Alaska, Hawaii, we've not hit. But some of those states, actually last spring, we went down to Arkansas, did some camping and fishing down in there. But Louisiana this year is on our radar. We're going to go down to Gulf Shores, camp over to the Delta, and Louisiana, New Orleans, never been over there. So it's like one more state to scratch off our list. So kind of
cool place, cool culture, just cool people, good food. Yeah, I hope you just tell everyone it was a terrible experience and not to come. It's a gem. It's a treasure.
Unreal. So beautiful.
Yeah. It's I had a thing with the governor couple of weeks ago. One of the things that she was pointing out is that Arkansas was the most moved to state last year.
Really?
Also, it's just wild, yeah.
I mean, there's mountains. So there's mountains. We spent a lot of time, and I can't think of the name of the river now.
Buffalo River?
Buffalo River. Fished it, floated it, and it was like we saw caves and saw woods and mountains, and it's crazy how much diversity in the landscape there is. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, the flat delta, big mountains. Clay Newcomb. I'm sure probably a lot of your listeners know him or listen to him from the Bear Grease podcast on the Media Network. But he's from Arkansas as well. He refers to the Ozarks and the Ouachita Mountains, which are the two mountain ranges that come together here in Arkansas, as the Rockies of the East. Just kind of this like this intimate. They're like a more intimate version of the Rockies. So it's just kind of,
Yeah, I love that. It's like I think of like Jeremiah Johnson. He's like Rocky Mountain is the marrow of the world. Like I feel like there's a little bit of that going on there.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. So, we were messaging. This episode is brought to you by 2O Gear, innovators in technical hunting clothing. 2O is a newer company. It's based right here in Michigan. And whether you're hunting elk in the mountains or chasing antelope in the plains or traipsing through swamps after that ruddy buck, 2O has you covered with premium jackets and pants, merino wool layers, everything you could possibly need to stay comfortable in the woods. Their products are engineered for functionality and durability, ensuring you stay protected in any conditions. Plus, their camo is really effective. We're big fans. So don't take our word for it, though. Go to 2ogear.com and check it out. Just before, maybe yesterday, 2 days ago, I think your hunting season is closed, but you had sent me a picture of your South Texas buck that you just got back. How's that?
Yeah, I will say we have a whole nother month. Archery deer goes from the last weekend of September to the last weekend of February. Ooh, it's phenomenal. Nice. So such a long season. I'm kind of cooked on hunting though, so I may go out a couple more times, but I'm just kind of done. But yeah, so I finally got shipped to me earlier this week. Yeah. A deer I got in South Texas with one of my good buddies, Jesus Flores. We do a ton of hunting together down in Texas. And this is by Texas standards, he would be a tiny deer. I don't know what he'd measure out at. Maybe, 130 or something like that, 140. But he is just an old guy. I mean, been around the block. Just, he couldn't make antlers anymore. And so what he has are just little stubs. But he was just an old deer.
Yeah, it's cool. Was it like it wasn't a shoulder mount. It was a fuller mount than that, right? I don't remember.
It was a pedestal mount. It kind of came down his back a little bit. We really wanted to capture his neck. The rack was really cool, but the neck, it's hard to see it in the photos, but the neck, his neck was so puffed up, just swollen from the rut. We were watching him all afternoon. No shots were given, and then he was just running hard, dogging those does, but yeah, it was a pedestal kind of. I don't remember what the terminology is, like a quartering to, like upright head to capture that neck. And originally I was going to put it on a big, like a wooden cask, like a beer or whiskey cask.
Nice, yeah.
And I was looking online and I saw some photos of those, and I didn't really like how they looked with kind of that angle of the head on some other deer. And so I decided to make my own pedestal, and I found an old desk from the school that's broken. It has little kids etching their little name into it. The legs are broke. So I mounted it to the top of that desk and covered it with an axis hide, put some quail feathers on there and, shed. It turned out really cool.
Yeah. For the people who aren't hunters, they don't really realize how much thought goes into display. I think about it all the time. It's like a lot of my brain space has been dedicated to where you put something on the wall.
This is my first taxidermy deer. I love doing Euros, and I've always done my own. I've got a pretty darn good system figured out, and I'm pretty good at them. And so they're cheap. I mean, pretty much free. And then I can have my antlers 2 days later. I had to wait a year for this one, which is why I haven't done it in the past. And but man, I'm glad I did. It was worth the wait.
Yeah, he turned out cool. No, I do the same thing. I don't know. I don't have any mount. I don't have any text. I mean, I've got a mountain lion rug kind of with, I guess that's taxidermy. I've had capes done.
Hmm.
our skins done, but I mostly have Euro mounts. So I'm kind of with you. I feel like with the time, like you said, I hate waiting like a year to see this buck that I think about a lot. It's hard to
Well,
wait.
I want to hear about that mountain lion. Something I want to try next year though is probably doing the Euro, because it's a little bit faster, but then finding a way to kind of paint the skull so it looks bloody, and then do one of those pack mounts. Have you seen those?
Oh yeah, and
Roll
then
up a
like the wooden, yeah.
Yeah, roll up a hide because I could do that pretty quickly, and that'd be a fun way to get something back. But tell me about this cat you got.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's funny. Right before this call, we're working on editing, and it's been we're turning the hunt into a film, and it's been difficult. It's been just a lot. We brought in different biologists and everything, but the hunt itself was just wild. Like you spend all this time cutting this track. Then when you cut the track, you have to follow it, make sure it's the right cat,
Mm,
and everything. And so, I mean, we went from a day of just sitting around to nothing, of nothing really, just walking around driving snowmobiles around, to finally you cut it, you let the dogs go and they'll track for a long time, and you just kind of wait, and you're like, what? And then all of a sudden they start barking different, their
yeah.
tone and their frequency changes. It's like, oh, it's time to go. And like, yeah, once that happens, it's
Mm.
go mode. We're whipping around the mountain on snowmobiles, and my camera guy's rolling his snowmobile over. He had never ridden one before, and so it was like, these aren't trails that you are like manicured trails like you might have. Here in Michigan, we got a bunch of, especially up north, and so I'm like, man, hopefully this goes well. And sure enough, like at one point he's behind me and he flies off, and I didn't even know. The other time he's in front of me, and I just see him kind of jump off. I'm like, oh. So we finally get to it, and it was like right at the end of the day,
Mm.
and so we were kind of in a rush. But we get up to the mountain lion, and it's like, all right, I can see him in the tree. Just kind of chill for a minute, try to like, and just kind of sit in awe of this animal that you don't really ever see. Like I had never seen when I've had him around.
Mm.
Um, and so we're looking at him, and kind of my camera guy's getting his stuff ready. And all of a sudden the cat gets up, he's like agitated, and moves to the other side of the tree. And clearly he's about to just take off. And like, he's at the furthest range that we can find him. If he's gone, at the end of the day, we can't tree him again in daylight. And if he's gone, we won't find him again the next day. So it's like, it goes from kind of chill to throwing stuff off, running down the mountain, trying to shoot it. And I shot him right as I didn't know it because I was looking at him through my scope. But right as he sprung to jump, I shot him at the same time. And so if I would have waited like a quarter of a second, he'd have been gone. So needless to say, we shot him, died instantly, skinned him out, packed him out, made him into bratwurst, and I'm getting him tanned. But yeah, the meat is the best.
I've
It's
heard
so
of.
good. Yeah. No, no. Like if there wasn't such a stigma around eating cats,
Uh-huh.
which I kept telling people when I was going hunting, I'm like, oh, it tastes like any house cat would taste,
Mhm.
and people are like, oh. But it has no gaminess, no weird flavor. It's just like meat, like kind of porky, chickeny meat.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
so cool. They're a cool animal. I've never seen one in person. I was in Idaho in the October of 23 a year ago, and elk hunting, and I was playing a cat and mouse with a lion up there. Those tags you can, if you get an elk tag, you can use it for a bear, a cat, a wolf, a deer, and the so I was just playing this cat and mouse game. I was on some elk trail one day. I found a whitetail that was scratched up a little bit, and so I pulled it kind of across the hill a little bit, and I came back the next morning and it was tucked under a fallen tree, covered up with leaves,
No
chewed
way.
on. Did the same thing. I pulled it out and I just kind of hung out in that area all day. Didn't see anything. I did that for the next 3 days, and every day I came back, and the cat would I would pull the deer out, and every day I would come back, the deer would be eating a little bit more on and stuffed under this tree. And it was just really cool, man. It was kind of nerve wracking though, going in before sunrise and going out after dark. Like I kept my pistol like on me, not in my backpack, but like
Yeah.
actually in my hand. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biologists we had talked to showed us these two cat skulls, and one is a full adult male, one is like a sub adult, like a young one, and you can see the fang marks in the young one that another lion had bit it right behind the head and just killed it. And
Yeah.
so like he was showing us that the size of right here for them, they don't have a jaw that moves side to side because they don't
Mhm.
grind their food. So like a bear is loose, like people's are loose. Theirs just goes up and down, so it's all pure muscle, just closing and opening.
That's cool. I can't wait to see
Pretty
the
wild.
video.
Yeah. OnX is the title sponsor of our podcast here at the Fair Chase, and it's a must-have app for all of us who love to explore the outdoors. Whether you're hunting or hiking or fly fishing, OnX gives you detailed, accurate maps right at your fingertips. With property boundaries, topographical features, and trail data, you'll always know where you are and where you're headed. You'll also likely be able to figure out where that big buck is headed to. Plus, their offline maps mean you're covered even in the most remote locations. OnX is the ultimate tool for outdoor navigation, making every adventure safer and more enjoyable. Download OnX today and explore with confidence. How's knife making going?
Dude, it's so fun. I'm still learning so much. I'm for the sake of time and money, I'm not forging my own blades yet. So I'll have that outsourced and have blades like pre-treated and stuff. But I'll do all the finishing on them, shaping the blade, handles, all this stuff. And I just recently started making slip joint knives and kind of like trapper blades, and they've been so fun. Peening the little peens in them, hammering the little pins in them, and it's just a lot of fun. Actually, hopefully, I don't know if this is when you'll have this up, but by probably Friday night, I'll have a lot that I'm going to put on Instagram or up on Instagram through my little Etsy page. But I have one a similar style to the one that you have,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a orange Cerakote blade, and I'm going to put a white paracord handle on it that I'm going to send to you. So,
Oh,
you know,
heck yeah.
kind of following that color scheme. It's one like similar to this, but it'll
Yep.
be orange and white together. And
Clean.
just it's simple, basic knife, but I use this for every deer. Every deer I got this year. I'd send you this one, but it's got deer on it.
They get a smell. I've done it with the paracord in the past, and they get a little funky after a while. You get weird stuff in there.
What I do is like to clean them. Still need to clean this one, but I'll just put it in a glass in the kitchen sink overnight with bleach water, pretty heavy on bleach, and then I'll rinse it out, and then I'll do the same thing with Pine Sol, and then rinse it out, and it
Oh, really?
yeah
The
kills
pine, is the
anything.
pine saw like for like a soapiness clean, or what's
Yeah,
the
it seems to like degrease it a little bit. I'll put a little bit of dish soap in it too, but it freshens it up, helps
nice?
with the smell. Yeah.
I mean, the knife that I have, I've brought. I try to remember to send you pictures that I of where I've taken it, and
Mhm.
it's been awesome. It's my favorite blade I have, and so yeah, it's cool. It's cool that too when you know the guy who's made it.
Yeah.
You can see the person and stuff. It's knives are different that way, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know.
They tell a story. That's something I'm learning. I've talked with a couple different knife makers. One in particular, Jason Ritchie is his name. He's on Instagram. Just does, phenomenal work, and he's really like kind of teaching me the ins and outs of it. It's kind of like hunting. You can learn stuff on YouTube, but when you have someone actually teaching you, you learn so much faster and it's more personal. But one of the points that he made is like a knife, like any kind of craft, tells a story of the craftsman. And so you can go to Walmart or Bass Pro, anywhere else, and get a good product, whatever you want, for a much cheaper price. But it's just a product. It doesn't tell a story. You have to make the story with it, and that's going to cost your own time and money. But
Yeah.
when you get a knife or a homemade like a custom recurve or longbow or a fly fishing rod or something like that that's
Yeah.
handmade by an artist, by a craftsman, like you pay a little bit more for it, but there's a story there, the connection, and there's a lot of levels to it.
Yeah, it's got the maker is in the blade.
Yeah,
That's cool. Yeah,
yeah.
so it's excited. It's a good knife.
I'll get this one done and get it out to you.
Yeah, I'll post it up when I have it so people who are listening can see what I'm talking about. They're so cool.
Yeah.
So I mean, hunting podcast. So we should talk a little hunting here. So you're a priest and a hunter, and I was so my dad's a pastor. I was raised into hunting by like a group of theologically minded folks. So we'd go to deer camp, and there was three, these are all men that were older. I was usually like the only kid there, but three pastors, two professors of theology. And so, growing up, I just had a chance to ask them whatever question I had about anything at deer camp. And it was kind of cool because you're with the guys, and everything from, what is hunting and what's that about, to like, things that a 13-year-old, why are boobs so cool, or like, and have these guys that just can give you answers to it, and as a kid, it was just a hugely, for me, hugely important in both my faith formation and just my excitement in being around the woods and what it was to be a man. So like all of that has kind of started, was those seeds were planted as a kid. And as I've grown older, it's the things that I gravitate towards most is, what is it to be a man? What is
Mm-hmm.
it to be a follower of Christ? And what is it to be a hunter? And like I said, a lot of that started those days at deer camp with these guys that would, full of, orange camo and not, in front of their congregation. So it was kind of cool. And so having access to people like you who have spent their lives studying God's word is just exciting. And so, yeah, I'm glad to have you here. With that all being said, and the huge introductory statement that I made, like, why do you hunt? What's your background? What, as a priest, why do you hunt? How do you think about that?
Yeah, but great, good intro there, just for painting this picture. And also, that's a good question for me. Like, why do I do it? I love life and I want to live it to the fullest. And hunting is one of the ways that allows me to get more out of life, but not in a way that, and I'll unpack this. I don't know how deep you want to go, but like, so hunting allows me to live, at least at this stage in my life, it's a key element in me living the fullest life that I can possibly live. And so, and what I mean is like every day, and St. Augustine, he talks about this, St. Augustine in his Confessions and other writings, like God, God created us like, to live the fullest life. He wants us to have the deepest joys, the deepest of all joys, the greatest of all happiness, the most perfect of all pleasures. And this world does not provide that. And so what we do, we go on this endless pursuit of seeking um, satisfaction in these temporal and passing things in the world that will not provide it. And so all of us have experienced this, the angst, the anxiety, the restlessness of pursuing something that we think is going to give us joy, and it doesn't do it. So we do more of it, or we go to something else. So this whole cycle of humanity. Now, what hunting does is like it helps me to order stuff, and it's constantly pulling me out of myself. This is all going to come back. It's going to make sense in a second.
Yeah.
But it's this constant pulling out of myself and constant ordering of my actions in line with everything around me to a greater good. Now, this can't go on for infinity, so there has to be a greatest good. And as Christians, that's God, right? That's our Heavenly Father. That's the triune God. Jesus Christ, our Savior, the power of the Holy Spirit. And so this infinite, like perfect Almighty God that created space and time, but that it entered into space and time to be one with us. And so through the incarnation, not to get too theological or whatever, but like we're kind of down here anyways, it's like God took on flesh and goes through everything that we can experience as humans so that all of our human experiences can be stepping stones back to him. Now to bring this back all to hunting, it's like for me to get the most out of hunting, I've got to have so many areas of my life balanced. I got to eat well, got to exercise. I have to have the discipline in my own daily life to get my work done, to have free time to hunt. I've got to have gear tuned. That requires a particular knowledge. I have to think of the whole life cycle. And then there's an element of sacrifice in it. Every time you or me or any other hunter that's doing it with, their heart, you could be the, the oldest, most veteran hunter that's killed hundreds of animals. And every time you could walk up to that animal, you're going to feel a sting. There's something there that thinks like, man, I killed this thing. But that's the element of sacrifice and sacrificial love. And that's what draws us to respect the animal. Yeah. So I just opened a big old can of worms. So it just helps me to live life. People listening probably think, dude, you're lost and confused. and, and hunting helps me to kind of order the ways that I'm lost and confused.
Well, and I always thought of it as and obviously it's a fallen world, but when you engage with creation, you're engaging directly with something God made, as
Mm,
opposed to most of my life is engaging with a man-made reflection of what God made. So you're on your phone, you're seeing pictures of outside, and you're messaging people that way. You're not talking to somebody in person or actually engaging in nature itself. So yeah, I mean part of it for me is, you're more directly engaging in something that God had a hand in creating, as opposed to something that we
mm,
create as almost like a shadow or a reflection of what is actually there. Does
yeah,
that
and
make sense?
yeah, and the why it's so wild out there. Anyone that's you mentioned camping earlier with your family, the other guys that go hunting or out in the woods on their own, especially the backcountry guys, like there's something about that that's terrifying. You could be the biggest macho man, and you
Yeah.
may be, but I guarantee you, when you're out there every couple of weeks, or if you're out there for a week or two, every fall or whatever hunting, there is going to be a moment when you think about your own mortality. Even if I
Yeah.
don't care how big and bravado and macho man you are, there's going to be a moment when you're out there and you think, I could fall down this rock and break my leg and no one would find me. And this, like, animals would eat me and I would die. Or
Yep.
my appendix could burst and I could die out here. Or,
Yeah.
a heart attack, or it goes through everyone's mind. And so there's this element of our own mortality, and that nature draws that out of us, reminds us that our time is passing. But there's also an intimacy about it, like that brings us so much peace and calm. It just helps us to put things in check. So cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. When you said that, reminded me the first time I ever did an elk hunt, with my brother and my dad. We get stuff happens, the mountain happens. They're like, "Hey, we're going back." They're soaking wet, whatever. And so there was a moment where I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to be out here by myself." And I remember I've never, Michigan is different than Colorado or wherever, and my stomach flipped. You can feel it when you're like, whoa. And it's like a weird sense of quiet peace and terror at the same time,
Yeah.
But, like you said, I mean, there's almost an element where you realize how little you have control over.
Mm-hmm.
And how much it's like when you're out here, like you said, you could fall, something happens internally, whatever happens, some kind of animal that you've created in your head attacks you that may or may not exist. And it's like, man, I didn't realize how vulnerable like I actually am in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like in my house, I turn up the heat if I'm cold. I turn, and it's I can take care of myself. But then when you're out and it's like, no, actually you can't. There's a lot more going on than you think.
That terrifies. You mentioned the control part. We love control because it gives us false security, and the world we live in allows us to live behind this facade of like perceived control that we have, and it's all passing. Um, and so it does remind me of, like just a key element for all Christians is like, we're not called to really control anything, but we're called to be stewards of everything. And
Yeah.
so that it's a very subtle dynamic. Control is one about just strong handing stuff, domineering it, bossing it around. But stewardship implies a relationship. And that's where the fullness of life really begins, when you offer yourself, and then you make yourself vulnerable, but you also assume the responsibility of taking on somebody or something else that's made themselves vulnerable before you. Your child, your wife, and you to them to you, but also life in general. So this interesting dynamic between control versus like stewardship, and the responsibility implied with that, in all, not just hunting, but all areas of life.
Yeah, it's like you have to you rely. I mean, when you realize how little control you have to rely on a higher power, and hopefully, a lot of times people come to that in painful ways or whatever. But it's like stewardship is you rely on God, and then you then take that and and put it out into the way that you interact with the world. So,
Yeah.
you mentioned stewardship. It's been on my mind lately, especially with some of the recent hunts that I've done, like mountain lion.
Mm-hmm.
People have a lot of questions about why you'd go and kill this beautiful, magnificent lion in the wilderness. People get a little upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
It was just on a bison hunt, and you want to talk about stewardship gone wrong and then gone right.
Hmm.
I mean, the bison is like emblematic of that.
Yeah.
So, growing up, and I'm not Catholic, as we've talked about in the past, and I feel like my church background doesn't always have the best um, application of theology to things outside in the world. And so, growing up, I studied actually a lot of Catholic thought and things like how, when I was in college, is like, why do you go to war, and how the Catholics have thought about that, and it's been helpful in just engaging the world with your faith. But stewardship is a different one. And so, you mentioned stewardship, and there's that idea probably brings a lot to the minds of people listening, who have heard a lot of different things about what that is and different conceptions. But like, in your opinion, and from the things you've studied, how should hunters think about stewardship and our role in the world?
Yeah, fantastic question. You've had some good questions today. I think it I think it would kind of like I was alluding to just a second ago, it would refer to an individual's free and conscious participation and assumption of responsibility for the things in their life. So, I mean, if you think of a kid, like, how old's your daughter?
12.
12, yeah. So, whenever she's a newborn and she's hungry, you don't say, get your own food, twerp, leave me alone. Like, you feed her, right? Or if she needs clothes changed, anything like that. And, like, you assume this responsibility. It's stewardship of her, right? And as she gets older, that stewardship evolves. It never leaves because now she dresses herself, she feeds herself, but you have to work to give her food. But as she gets older, your stewardship is going to be like an intellectual, psychological. You're going to teach her how to do these things on her own, etc. But um, just kind of going down that bunny hole. So what is, I guess in broad strokes, stewardship would be like somebody recognizing that their actions have consequences and they have to be responsible for those actions, for the outcome of those consequences in their life, and also the people that are connected with them. And but that applies to everything: work, family life, faith, hunting, conservation. This, is, of course, a hunting podcast, so that's where our mind goes big time with that. But a hunter, um, yeah, yeah. This responsibility, assumption of assuming the responsibility and one's role that they have in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, which assumes we have a higher value than some of the things around us, or more of a
Mm,
weight and a responsibility. How do hunters get that wrong? How do we get that wrong when we talk about it and think about it?
yeah. I think one of the ways that we shoot ourselves in the foot is it's in this polarized world that we're living now with social media and stuff, where like every little hunter or hunt group or outlet or influencer or whoever, they wanted to be the biggest and the best. And like it's good to want to strive for a big platform, but at what expense? So the prime example that we hear all the time is that archery is a much superior form of hunting than rifle hunting. And if you use a gun, then well, I guess we'll let you do it because you're not as good as us. And then the bad guys are like, well, I mean, if you need to use a compound bow since you're not good enough hunter to get within 7 yards, then you do that. And now spears are all the thing, and they say, well, oh, well, if you need to use a trad bow because you can't use a spear, then well, that's kind of a silly example, but it's practical, like it's real. We get that, we see that, but it's also the same thing of people thinking that well, elk hunting is the most superior form of hunting, and if you do whitetail hunting, then it's because you're fat and lazy, or you just can't handle the mountains.
Yeah.
Well, and it's I think one of the ways that we get the stewardship wrong is kind of in that area. The way that we build walls, not bridges, but within the hunting community, recognizing that every element has its role. As Scripture says, Paul says to Corinthians, like, you know, many members make up the one body. Not everybody the part can say it's the hand or the foot, or the eye. Just like the different gifts in the body of Christ. Some for teaching, some for preaching, some for prophecy and healing, and all these different things. But I think that's one area where we get it wrong, where we can't set aside the ego because we're striving for control. We don't recognize the stewardship element and it's an element of control. That's one little opinion of mine.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, it's like pride is plays a big part in that, and that's a hairy one, man. I don't know, for me at least, pride is a
Yeah,
hard one to kill, and it just keeps coming back. It's doesn't
yeah.
stay dead.
It's the father of all sins. That's what Adam and Eve. That's what got the ball rolling. And
Yeah.
that's part of every sin is pride. Putting us before God. And but it's really interesting how looking at the bigger picture and how we all play part of a bigger plan, rightly ordered to God. Like it just puts everything else in perspective. So, for example, like the silly example I just gave between elk hunting versus whitetail hunting. Like I've done both. I've done a bunch of both, and there's a grind in both of them that's different. I can go out for 2 weeks out west, and it's brutal. It's one of the two most brutal weeks of my of the year. I won't deny that. But at the same time, I know plenty of western hunters that could not go whitetail hunting for these little 2 to 4 hour sits 2 to 4 times a week for 3 months in a row. They lose their mind. So it's like, okay, you can hike up a mountain, but you can't mentally get over this hurdle. So where's the strength there? So there's areas where we can all grow, and we want to strive for that balance. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so that's a couple little thoughts on.
Yeah, love it. All right, so stewardship, we're hunting. Death is a huge part of ideally what you're aiming for hunting. So, stewardship, death, creative design, God's creative design for the world. How do they? A good example is, I was, talk about camping with my family. We had 2 years ago, last year. We drove out to Newfoundland and took you get to Nova Scotia, you put your car on the ferry, and it takes you, a couple hours to the island. While we're out there, we go to this place called Mistaken Point. It's, I think it's UNESCO World Heritage, right? And so it's this kind of like these steps that go out into the ocean. And as you're walking out, you're stepping on some of the oldest fossils that are like these multicellular life ever found on Earth. They think it's 500 million years old, and so you're walking around and you're like, well, people weren't around when this happened, but we brought sin into the world, and sin is what led to death. But isn't this death? And how does death fit into how does this all fit together? And so it's a kind of a big question, but it's been one I've really wondered since just walking out there. And again, when you walk up to a
Mm,
dead deer or whatever you're trying to hunt.
yeah. Death is an inevitable part of the cycle of life that we're in, which is as believers baptized into the body of Christ, and through baptism we become beloved sons and daughters of God. That's when we really enter into the truest life. The body comes and goes, while the soul lives on, which is why we take sin seriously, because we understand that I could get hammered and have a hangover tomorrow and be fine the next day, but if I commit like a really grave sin like that will not really be gone day after tomorrow. Like, so the effects of sin are a lot different than the effects of physical um, problems. Now, sin and physical stuff, a lot of that's connected. But so death is it's part of the cycle of life, and that's where Christ's death on the cross gives it another meaning. So before it was just like the last straw is the stop sign, whereas with Christ he shows us that for those of faith, it's not the end, but simply another step to the next part of life, which is we pray for life eternal with the Lord and our Savior. So it's this again going back to the control.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate test of the ultimate question of saying, are you willing to really surrender this, all the control that you have? Because in that moment you have zero control, and that's when your cards are shown. You know, oh gosh, it could get deep theologically, but just in a few words, I would just say like death is an essential part of life. And so what do you do with it? How does it motivate you to live a better life now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, having had some brushes with real death myself, it's now, you talk about loss of control. I'm working on becoming less terrified of it, but it's terrifying, still to your core, terrifying, different than anything else.
Yeah.
And as I've thought about that since some of those times or that time, I definitely see the connection to control and how much control really, you want it. My body strives for my own control, and it just keeps pushing against that.
Yeah. And if we take a step back and look at it from a little more simple way, like when you can wrestle with those things at a higher level, it puts other things in perspective. So like if it's a long day at work or a busy week and you're just stressed and then your daughter does something and you just like you yell at her, like when these things are in perspective, like the things that before may have just frustrated you. You maybe don't do this, but it was just an example of
Oh,
like,
I do. Yeah.
and then afterward you're thinking, James, this wasn't a big deal. Like she just wanted to play Legos with me,
Yeah.
you know, and and it's when we keep the our own mortality before us. It really helps put stuff in perspective. It helps us to fry the fish that need to be fried or fight the battles that need to be fought and let the others burn. Like this is not a big deal. It's not a
Yeah.
big deal. It's one of the things that really helps us put things in perspective. It can create this terrible angst if it's the ultimate test of our control, this fear, this angst, this anxiety, or if we recognize that there's someone in our life that's even greater than that death, that final moment, then it's a source of great freedom. Of course, where you recognize like this is the ultimate test of my lack of control, but that's okay because someone else has even greater control, and He has given us His word,
Yeah.
and that's faith. That's the life we live.
I mean, it's just wildly beautiful, and sometimes really hard to wrap your mind. Always really hard to wrap your mind around.
It's brutal. That's the love of the cross, and that's kind of a way of like maybe reconciling all this, the brutality of it, to the love of Christ on the cross. Like He freely chose that, which is the greatest act of love. And love, love and death have so much in common because they're the deepest forms of complete surrender.
Hmm.
If you truly love somebody, then you're truly going to surrender yourself. You're going to abandon yourself to them, and that's like death. And so it's all about where's this ordered to. That's how the conversation started. Like God being this higher being, when it's properly ordered, the surrender, then giving our control or perceived control to someone else, that surrender, that vulnerability, it creates freedom. Whereas if I get addicted to something, I'm giving my control to something below me, and it takes life away instead of give life. So it's all about that proper ordering to higher and greater goods.
Yeah. I love that. It's hard. It's easy. It's easy to talk about and very hard to learn. And it, hopefully that's part of just the life of, becoming more and more like Christ.
Yeah,
Uh,
a lot of theology for 11 a.m.
yeah, that's right. I just threw you right on. I didn't even give you any heads up on any of this. So I just was seeing if you were, ready for the day. I can't let you just go into your day without, some warm up. Well, I know you've got a busy day, so I don't want to take you and keep you here, but I really appreciate you taking the time just to have this little chat and talk a little hunting and,
Yeah.
send people your way. So, if people want to follow you on socials and everything else, where can they find you? See the knives you're making, see the way that you're living and all the things you're up to.
Yeah. Uh, Mainly Instagram. It's just all spelled out. Father Stephen J. Gadberry. There's no. I wish I could think of some simple, easy to remember thing, but Father
Yeah.
Stephen J. Gadberry. And it's all there on social media. Kind of share a lot of stuff there, and that's kind of like my big place to go. I did a video a couple of years ago with Bishop Robert Barron, and we're on fire. It's called "The Making of a Catholic Priest." So if people want to like YouTube that, it kind of tells my story in a little bit more depth. It was a really humbling project. They did a phenomenal job with it. I was humbled that they asked me to do it, but kind of tells my life story. But
It's an amazing story. I've seen it. Yeah, definitely worth watching.
yeah, but yeah. So I'd say check out those two places: YouTube or the Instagram. Father Stephen J. Gadberry. You see the knife stuff, the working out stuff, Jesus stuff, my dogs. I just saw your beagle behind you. Look like a beagle.
Yeah.
I got my two right in front of me sitting here on the couch.
I know you got a beagle, right? That's a beagle.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just, I mean, this is my second one, and I don't know. I got hooked on them, and it's like, it's like this pain that I put myself through, but it's
They're
also they're hilarious.
annoying. They're so annoying, but they're like the biggest personalities.
Yeah, they're the best and the worst at the same time. Well, I appreciate coming on. Everybody, go check them out. Thanks again for doing this.
Hey, keep up the work, brother. God bless you, man.
Appreciate it.